Hey guys, so this video is about how to get perfect timing and stitches, all right? So this is a really long video, all right? I don't know how else to say, but it just got really long. So for starters, this is going to show you how to set the timing on your machine. And I know a lot of people say, well, you put it to 12, you put the notch to 12:30, 1 o'clock. That is not really how to set the timing on your machine and how to get the best stitches. And I'm sorry to say, but it's just not. So I'm going to try in this video to go into detail and explain how to set your timing in a deeper dive, a better way, a next level to set your timing with the notch and the needle, not just setting it at 12:30 or 1. So that's the point of this video, is to try to really explain how your machine works and how to set your timing. And it is a long video, I'm sorry, but I try to really explain everything about why or why not things happen. And then the second part is I'll go into, if you have an original vintage Singer and you have an original vintage Singer worm gear, there is a right way and a wrong way to put your worm gear on your machine. And that, if you don't get it on the right way, will affect how your moss stitch works. So if you have an original vintage Singer and you can't get moss stitch to happen right, this video will talk about that. If you want to know about moss stitch, I've already posted a few videos about how to get moss stitch. So if you have your machine timed right, you should be able to then flip your worm gear to get moss, although it's not that simple. So I may make a future video about moss, but please take a look at my YouTube channel. Search through all the titles and you'll find lots of videos. If you look and read all the titles, you may find what you're looking for. Okay, again, sorry for the long video, but this is really to tell you how to set your timing next level, really accurate, fine-tuned, not putting it at 12:30 or 1 o'clock, because that's just like getting you in the ballpark. And when people say things like lower your needle or rotate your needle, that's like saying, I'm going to move my dartboard so when I throw my dart, the dart hits it. It's still getting the dart on the board, but you're moving the dartboard instead of throwing and having it bullseye when the dartboard is in the right place. So this video is going to attempt to get you to have the right timing. And again, apologize if it's long. I'm already babbling. Apologize if it's long-winded, but I just want to try to repeat things and say things and give background information so everything's clear. So buckle up, get the popcorn, and stay tuned. Hey everybody, so I'm sitting on the floor in my arts and crafts room and I wanted to do a video about timing. I want to explain to you what is timing on a chain stitch embroidery machine, and I wanted to go over how to set it and also how to get the best and most accurate stitches out of your machine, and that's all dependent on your timing. You may see videos on YouTube and people say to set your notch to 12:30 or 1. Okay, so I want to kind of go over what that means, what it does, and how you can then from that fine tune your machine. So I have on the floor here with me a Cornelli A machine, which I'm working on, so I figured now's a good time to do this video. And I'm going to try to explain in full and great detail how the timing works and how to set it, how to understand how to troubleshoot, and how to make your machine give you the most perfect stitches, okay? So when we're talking about timing, basically the needle goes up and down. It's on a controlled stroke, up and down. It's the same distance every time the hand wheel rotates, okay? And the notch in the looper rotates because the worm gear is moving back and forth. So this is a looper. Hopefully you guys can see that. This is a looper and it has a notch in it, which is up top. It's 12 o'clock now. That's the notch that grabs the thread, okay? So there's a notch in the top. Right now the notch is at what we call 12 o'clock. This would be like 12:30, 1 o'clock, okay? And this rotates around. This is an aftermarket looper, but that is what it looks like, okay? I'm sorry, my camera's not focusing. Okay, that's what a looper looks like. And it comes out the bottom. This is where you're putting your thread in the bottom. Okay, this is a worm gear, okay? I'm sorry, my camera isn't focusing very well. There's a screw here, which you use to set this and tighten it on the bottom rotating shaft. This rotates, sorry, I'm literally on my floor, so I'm doing the best I can without fancy video. So the worm gear rolls back and forth and it rotates the looper a set distance every time your needle goes up and down. It also moves the worm gear back and forth and that rotates. And then that's what makes the stitch, but also while you're rotating the handle, it turns the worm gear so that the looper and worm gear are always timed so that you're always making a stitch no matter what direction you're going. So basically, sorry, this little screw here on your worm gear, that's what you loosen, and then you will rotate this worm gear, which is basically in the block attached to the looper. And when you rotate the worm gear, it rotates the looper, and that turns your notch. So if you want to set the timing on your machine, you go under your machine and you loosen, you loosen this screw here on the worm gear. This is a worm gear. And when you rotate this, without turning the handle or rotating anything on the machine, when you rotate this, this is attached through the gears. So it also rotates the looper, which in turn is rotating your notch. Okay, so that's sort of mechanically how it works, how you would change or relocate the notch, which changes the timing on your machine. So that's how it works. I find when I set my timing, it's easiest for me to kind of put both my hands under the machine and hold the screwdriver and get it ready, and then to look above, loosen it with one hand, rotate it with the other while I'm watching the notch from the top, and then snug it back up without ever taking my hands off the worm gear or the screwdriver. Because if you look away or you wiggle, it'll change by maybe 30 minutes. So what I want to do today is I want to show you how to set the timing and then how to verify that it's really accurate. So I don't have a PowerPoint, but I do have some visual aids. So I'm gonna just kind of go through it first of all. So this would represent your looper looking straight down from the top after you've taken your needle plate off. There's one large screw centered under the needle plate, which when you remove it, the needle plate will pop off. You can unscrew it a little and push up on that, it's technically a bolt, I guess, but screw, and the needle plate will rise up. You can grab it and pull it off. So when you look down, this is 12 o'clock. This is pointing away from you. 6 o'clock is where the person sits, and then of course 9 and 3. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to get your timing set to like the 12:30, 1 o'clock position. So you're going to loosen the screw on the worm gear. You're going to have your needle in the highest position, and you're going to have your handle facing you at 6 o'clock, and you're going to rotate the worm gear carefully until the notch gets to be around 12:30, 1 o'clock. It doesn't matter exactly, just up in this quadrant here, closer to the 12. Then you're going to want to snug your screw back up. And I don't know how many of you guys are new. This is a Chapman set. It's a gunsmithing screwdriver set. It's made by Chapman. This is number 8900. There are other types of screwdriver sets around, but this is really what you need to work on your machine, because these are hollow ground screwdriver points. And if you have any other regular household screwdriver, they will mess up your screws. And then if you have a tight screw, this little ratcheting driver is great if you have screws you can't undo. So I highly recommend investing in a gunsmithing screwdriver set. It doesn't have to be this one, but just whatever you're using. You really need this or you will really quickly ruin your screws. We don't want to ruin our screws because the screws and the screw threads are proprietary. So you can't go to the hardware store and buy a replacement screw. You're going to have to get an old one. But if you have a new machine, you can always get replacement parts. It just depends what kind of machine you have. And what I'm going over today, it applies to new replica machines and also vintage Cornellis and Singers and Linz Eckhart and everything else. So back to our visual aid here. So you set the notch to this location, 12:30, 1 o'clock, with your needle in the highest position and your handle at 6 o'clock, okay? If you don't know how to get your handle at 6 o'clock, please watch my unboxing video, all right? Now, this is difficult because there's a dead spot, a flat dead spot on the cam, which raises and lowers the needle. It's basically, everything functions on a sewing machine about a rotating shaft with cams and eccentrics that push things up and down at different times. So there's a dead or flat spot on the high point of the needle where when you ask 10 different people to set the needle to the highest position, some might be a little forward and back because there's like a dead spot or a little play in the hand wheel when the needle is in the highest position. So that can make it even more difficult to set your timing if you just put your notch to 12:30 or 1 o'clock, tighten the screw and think you're done. You're not, okay? There's a better way to fine tune your machine, okay? And this is how you'll get the best stitches with things like silk rayon floss or 600D thread that is a non-stranded thread. Everyone who's starting, they say, oh, they hate that thread. There's something wrong with their machine. I mean, if your machine's not timed right, yes, there's something wrong with your machine, but don't blame the thread. You really have to just have your machine perfectly timed, okay? So this is how you start, all right? You do this. Hopefully I've explained that properly by going under your machine, loosening this small little screw here on your worm gear and rotating your worm gear, which then in turn rotates your looper, and get your notch to the 12:30, 1 o'clock position. The end of the shaft, it doesn't really matter if it's sticking out of this hole, you know, it doesn't really matter where the worm gear is on the shaft, as long as when you turn the hand wheel over and the worm gear goes back and forth, you make sure that it's not hitting any of the block that is securing your looper to the machine, okay? So, you know, you can try to shoot for the shaft being flush with the end of this, and this is a little spring cap in here. It doesn't matter really where this is on the shaft, just as long as you tighten the screw down and you try to be consistent. Then you turn your hand wheel over by hand one time and verify that the looper doesn't smash into the metal block or go too far this way, and that, you know, that the gears on the looper, it's engaging. Like, you don't want it going like this, right? So you just have to make sure that you've got it on so that it goes in the middle range. I know that's a little too much information, but it's common sense to some people. Some people may not understand that. So how does this work? Okay, so this is an image of your looper in your machine. Okay, so it sits a little below your machine. In this case, the black is the part of your machine that holds the looper in, and this is your looper here with its hollow in the center and the notch, okay? So basically what happens, your needle has a hook in it, okay? And the hook comes down and it enters the looper, and the thread is brought around by the notch in the looper, and the needle, the hook in the needle grabs the thread and pulls it up. Okay, so people always say, I see this from time to time, where people say if your machine's not functioning properly, try to lower your needle. Okay, the timing is set by the needle position being able to catch the thread as it's brought around by the looper. If your needle hook, and hang on, I'll get a visual aid. Okay, so let's pretend this is your hook, needle. Okay, it goes down, it comes up, it goes down, it comes up. Your thread is here, the needle goes down, the thread comes around and it needs to go into the notch and your needle picks it up. Okay, that's basically what's happening. Okay, so when you lower the needle, it's still going up and down the exact same amount. So I'm sorry, I'm watching on the phone as I'm doing this. So the needle starts here, it goes down to here, and it comes back up, all right? So if my thread is coming around, it's constantly, my thread is going around in the looper, right? So when the needle goes down, at some point the thread comes by and the needle catches it, all right? Goes back up, that's it. If I lower my needle, so now let's say I've lowered it, so it's going like this, right? The thread's coming around. When is it going to catch it? It may hit the needle and it may come and get grabbed much later and go up. That would mean that if it's working like that, it's grabbing the thread much, much later. So your timing is faster. No, wait, slower, faster, because the notch is going past the hook and getting the hook much later. So it's sped up the notch to get, no, sorry, I said that wrong. Slower. Anyway, wrong time. That's the point of that. It is confusing, but so if your needle is lower, it's just gonna catch the thread at a different time. If your needle's higher, okay, it really has to get there to get the thread or it's gonna miss it. But the thing is, why I'm talking about needle height is that it's set, it's supposed to go into this hook right at the right time, okay? If it's too low, it's gonna hit the bar and it's gonna go like this and then it's gonna grab, okay? And by that time, the machine's already moved on to a different sequence in the timing. So what you really want is you want the thread to hit the hook right there and get pulled up. And the reason I say this is that if your thread's getting put into your needle, you can't see this now, if it's hitting right dead nuts on and catching your thread, that's great. If your needle's rotated a little further and it catches the thread, it might not catch all the thread. And then you get that mess on the bottom, and that's why floss is hard to use. So you want your needle to be catching your thread perpendicular and pulling it up. If your timing's wrong and you're rotating your needle or you're raising and lowering your needle, you're catching the thread at perhaps a non-ideal time. Like I can still catch it like this, right? But maybe it's not catching it square on. Catching it square on would be like this. It's got all the thread, no missing, caught it good. So you can play with rotating the needle to, like, let's say my thread is like this. I want my needle to come in here. If my thread is like this, I want my needle to come in here, perpendicular. So you need to figure out if you have to speed up your machine or slow your machine down, the timing of the notch so that it grabs a thread exactly perpendicular to your needle, okay? So I always set my needle at the highest position because if you have your needle lower, it just makes it harder to get fabric under and harder to get a denim jacket with a seam or something like that under your needle. And there's no reason to put your needle lower unless maybe you want really short moss loops. If you want different size moss loops, okay, change the height of your needle. But for everyone else who's doing chain stitch, generally speaking, I think if you have your needle at the highest position, you can get the most under your foot. So when you set the needle at the highest position, you then set your timing according to that. And then you go from there. So your needle is actually setting your timing. It's not just putting your notch at 12:30 or 1 and using your machine. If you're going to go into more detail and have a perfectly functioning machine, it's better to know where you've set your needle and set your timing accordingly, okay? I hope I'm making sense. I'm sorry if I'm going too slow or this video is too long, but I'm really trying to explain this for you guys so that you all can really understand I'm trying to do it in this video with visual aids so it will be clear, okay? And then for years, decades from now, everyone can understand. So, back to the visual aid. Oops, sorry. So, your needle comes down, it grabs the thread, the needle goes back up. All right. Okay. So this is your looper, and now we're looking straight down on it. So the red needle is in the center. Now the notch is at like 9:30. Okay. This is the ideal position. Hang on a second. Okay. Right now, with the notch and the looper at 9:30, this is, hang on, 6, 9, 12, 3. Okay. The notch is about at 9:30. This is the most ideal position in which to catch your thread. However, your needle has to be there to catch it, okay? So that's what I'm talking about when I say the height of your needle, it depends on the height of your needle and the position of the notch. So if your notch is there and your thread would normally be coming out of, well, from under the needle plate and across, but for this, let's just assume that the thread is coming across because the notch carries it around. Your notch in your needle has to be right there or it isn't going to catch it, okay? So if you've got your needle really low, your needle might be like this, and the notch is going to keep going around as your needle tries to catch the thread. So that's what I'm saying, that the needle height has to do with the timing. So I'm going to, not over yet, okay, I'm going to try to show you how this works and explain a little more in detail. Again, sorry for the long video. You guys going to complain about long videos? I mean, I'm trying to take the time to explain this to you clearly so it makes sense. And yes, it takes time. And then it takes time to practice and takes time to learn. So please hang on and bear with me. So now your notch is at 9:30. Your needle's coming down. This picture, the hook opening in the needle is perfectly positioned to catch that thread. Okay, so this is the looper, and this is the top of your looper. It's flat across. Try to shoot for the hook of the needle here. Okay, now what am I talking about? Put your needle in your machine. Put the hook of the needle to 6 o'clock. Put the needle in your machine. Ooh, hang on. Okay. So, anatomy of a needle. Okay. There's a shaft. There's an opening for the thread to go in, a little hook, and a point. All right. This is your needle. When I say put your needle in the highest position, this is what I'm talking about. You want to just see the triangular point of your needle sticking out of your nipple. You just want to see just the triangle sticking out of your nipple. Okay, this is the nipple. No more, okay? I mean, maybe a little more if you can't see it, but you basically want the nipple to cross your needle right here, and you just want to have this little tip sticking out. If it's any higher, it won't work. I don't know why. Singer didn't make it so the needle could go all the way up into the nipple, but I guess they just wanted to make it hard. So adjust your needle like this. So just the tip is sticking out of your nipple. Okay, then go in and set your notch to the 12-130 position, okay? And then what you need to do next, and I'll show you this on the machine in a second, but I just want to explain it. What you need to do next, after you've set your notch to the 12:30, 1 o'clock position, and the handle's at 6, you rotate your handle and you watch. Let me find my diagram here. You watch so that as you're rotating the hand wheel, the looper will rotate, and you'll see the notch come around. Okay, when the notch is at 9:30, you want your needle to be right here. So you're not going to change the needle. We've set the height of the needle to the highest position. That stays. What we're going to modify and change to meet the needle is the timing of the looper. Okay, the timing of the notch. So what you want to do, find my diagram here. You want to have the needle, sorry, it's complicated. Okay, so when you rotate, you want to have the needle go down, and on the upstroke, right when this hook is level with the top flat part of the looper, your notch should be at 9:30. And you can't see this unless you've set the needle in the right position, any position. I mean, it doesn't have to be the highest position, but that affects your timing. I'm using the highest position as a default, okay? You can modify it later after you get this. So you rotate the hand wheel, the needle goes down on the upstroke. And it doesn't have to be no motor, okay? We're talking about rotating by hand. You just rotate by hand so that your needle goes down, and on the upstroke, you stop it right here where the hook in your needle is just level with the top of the looper, okay? And so rotate it till you see this, and then stop and take a look at your notch. If your notch is at 9:30, you're good. Tighten your worm gear back and you should be good to go. And that should give you perfect chain stitches, okay? And when you do this, it's not a one-time thing. It's gonna take you trial and error, because when you go to tighten it, your notch might move to 10 o'clock or your notch might move to 9 o'clock, and then it's not gonna grab the thread as well. So just watch the action as the needle goes down and it gets right to here, right to the top of the looper. That notch should be at 9:30, okay? So hopefully I've explained this so you guys can kind of understand what I'm talking about and it makes sense. Because when you set the notch to 12:30 or 1, you're in the ballpark. And then when you go to rotate your hand wheel and you watch the needle go up and down and you see, where's my drawing? You see the needle at this position, your notch may be somewhere between 10:30 and 8:30. And that's with just setting your notch at the 1 o'clock or 12:30 position. It's just not real accurate. You really want it dead nuts on to hit the notch opening in the needle right when the notch is at 9:30. Now, you could do it at 9, but 9:30 gives you just a little bit of time, 30 minutes of making sure the thread got in the needle, and it works fine. So that's basically how to time your machine. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about worm gears. Original Singer worm gears, okay, are different than Mauser aftermarket worm gears. And I think Singer changed this at some time as well. Originally, I think the older worm gears, there's a slot in the worm gear, and you can rotate this nut to the other keyhole. I can't really do it when it's not clamped on something, but basically the screw right here is in a keyhole, and when you push this down, it rotates to the other keyhole. It's hard to do it when it's not in, but this is a keyhole right here, and the screw goes into the, into the keyhole, okay? And then this spring on the end, which is in here, and you can take it apart and look at it, it's no big deal, it's just kind of hard to get back together. That goes through this slot and into the other keyhole. So that's how you change from chain to moss, okay? So the original Singer worm gears, here we go. This is an original Singer worm gear, okay? You can tell it's original because it has these like little brush marks, looks like, here on this edge. Okay, can you see that? Those little brush marks. An aftermarket worm gear or some of the newer, maybe even vintage consos do not have that on the shoulder of the worm gear. Okay, do you see what I'm talking about? Can you see the difference? All right, so these little brush marks right here along this edge, sorry, right here, these things right here where the pen is pointing, that's kind of a dead giveaway that it's an original Singer worm gear. Okay, so if you look at your worm gear, the first thing is, if you have an original Singer, the first thing you want to do is determine where those keyholes are. Okay, so I've put a mark on this worm gear just above the keyhole. Okay, and on this worm gear, these marks are 180 degrees apart. Okay, and this is an original Singer. This is an aftermarket Mauser, and I have put marks again above the keyholes. Okay, this aftermarket part also 180 degrees apart. Some of the older Singers, when you put marks on, they're not 180 degrees apart. Okay, I think that this was done because it's easier to flip from chain to moss, but not all worm gears are like that. And I think that they realized that if you put, sorry, this is confusing. If your notches are not 180 degrees apart, it makes a difference where you put your worm gear on when you start. Because then when you rotate it, it's not rotating 180, and my leg is going numb because I'm sitting on the floor. It's not going 180, it's going either more than 180 or it's going less than 180 degrees. If you have a vintage Singer and your notches, your keyholes for the screw are not 180 degrees apart. So just keep this in mind, that if you have a vintage Singer, the chain is on this side of the slot. So what does that mean? That means that if you have a vintage Singer, that your keyholes for your screw are not 180 degrees apart, you will be installing it like this for chain stitch. Okay, and then you flip it around, this will be the keyhole you use for moss stitch. Okay, so chain is the screw facing you with the slot up, right? If you have an aftermarket worm gear or a Singer where the keyholes are 180 degrees apart, then it doesn't matter. You can install it either way. I think initially Singer did that because it works better, but they found that you have a 50-50 shot when you put this worm gear on of getting it in the right keyhole. And if you put the worm gear on your machine in the moss keyhole and time it for chain, then when you flip to moss, it will be out of time by half an hour. Okay, so it would be difficult. I'm sorry if this isn't making sense, but it's things that I've learned and I'm trying to explain it to y'all. Okay, so bear with me. Okay, so that's basically how you get your machine timed properly. And now I'm gonna go to the machine and I'm gonna try to explain it while we watch what the machine is doing. So hopefully it will make sense. All right, and right now I'm gonna be demonstrating on this machine I have on the floor, which is a Cornelli A machine, which I'm sort of refurbishing and trying to get it back together. I have put Mauser parts on the bottom. They work great. Some are just bolt on, and others, you know, you have to maybe make a few modifications, but that's not for this video. So I'm gonna pause you and I'm gonna put you into the phone holder and we'll examine the machine and how it works to be timed properly, so you can see what I've just been trying to talk to you about with the visual aids. Okay, hang on guys. Okay, so I got you guys in the phone holder now. We're here under the machine. This is the worm gear, okay? I'm rotating the handle under the table now, and it rotates the worm gear. This screw is in the keyhole that is set for chain if you have a vintage Singer, okay, this is the keyhole for chain. You can see if you want to change it to moss, you just, okay, you pull to the left. Oops, sorry. You pull to the left, and the whole entire worm gear moves to the left, and then you rotate the worm gear and it drops into the other keyhole because there's a spring in under this collar that's holding the screw on. If you happen to loosen this screw too much and the collar comes out, oh, hang on. Okay, so if I take this screw out, there's a spring in here and this metal part, that's it. Okay, the spring can come out. Basically, that's all there is to it, all right? So you can take that out. There's the little screw, right? Key thing here is when you put it back, do you see on this thing, the thickness here is less and the thickness over here is more, okay? It goes into your worm gear this way. That's kind of important, and it does affect the function of the worm gear. So if this thing comes out, you drop it on the floor, whatever, does not go this way. It goes back inside this way with the thinner part facing in. So you will put your spring back in the hole. Sorry. Okay, put the spring back in the hole. Put this in, push it down hard enough with something, finger, or sometimes you can use like another worm gear. If you have like them laying all around, you can push it in until you see that the screw hole is clear. I'm just using this other worm gear to push it in. You can use the end of a Sharpie or something. And then I'm gonna put the screw in. You kind of always want to try to start your screws by hand, okay? It's hard because the spring is working against me a little bit. I think I'm in. Gonna do it with the screwdriver. I'm not in. Ah, my goodness. Okay, this is why my videos are long. Okay, I got it. I'm gonna tighten it up just enough so that it doesn't pop back out. Okay, got it back in. All right. Sometimes when you're putting these worm gears on, it's hard because that's twisted now because of the force of the spring. You just have to wiggle it until it gets on. This is the aftermarket worm gear. A lot of times when people are trying to tighten a worm gear, the collar of the screw, get you some light here. The collar of the screw, I'll do it intentionally for a second here. Okay. The screw head is a little bigger than the screw threads. And sometimes when you tighten your worm gear down, the screw head, where did my tweezers go? The screw head can get caught on this piece of metal right here, and you can tighten the screw down, but the screw head is caught on this metal, and then it doesn't work. So when you tighten your screw down, just make sure that you can move it, because if you tighten it down and get the collar of the screw caught on the metal, it won't work. Happens a lot of the time because you can see the spring is like pushing this out. So just be sure after you've tightened it down that you can actually move it, okay, back and forth. If you can't move it, then you've tightened the screw onto the housing of the worm gear and it's not going to be free to rotate. That just is a little thing that happens once in a while. Okay, so here you can see I have my worm gear installed. Now I know I'm in the moss position because this is chain and this is moss. Okay, slot to the sky. So I'm gonna move it back. Okay, let's do this. Gonna move it back. You pull it out. You can rotate the worm gear. Okay, drop it in, Or the other thing you can do is you can pull it out and you can turn the handle. Okay, drop it in. Either way. So now I'm in moss. I'm going to go back to chain. Back to chain, okay? And then once you've got this in, it doesn't really matter. Sorry, I'm trying to adjust you here a little bit. It doesn't matter necessarily how much is sticking out the end. You know, you can put your finger there, you can make it flush. It can be further to the right or further to the left on the shaft. That really doesn't matter. But what you do want to check is that when you turn, I'm turning the hand wheel on top of the table on the machine. You just want to make sure that your worm gear isn't bottoming out over here or bottoming out over here. Okay. So there's a little bit of play in it. The threads on the worm gear are longer and they can go back and forth more than the stroke, but you just want to make sure you're not bottoming out either side. It doesn't really matter what's happening over here. All right. So now we're going to go and watch the notch in the looper and the needle. Okay, we're back at the machine. Sorry about the wiggling. I've got you set pretty much 90 degrees on to the needle. So the phone is at 6 o'clock. So I'm going to start to rotate the hand wheel and you can see the nipple and needle go down. Don't watch the notch or the looper at the moment. So the nipple goes down, it touches down. The pressure in the spring on your nipple holds the fabric down. And then the needle starts to come back up. And the needle tucks inside the nipple, which pulls the thread up through the fabric. And then the nipple starts to go back up, okay? And then we're back at the top of a stroke. So that's one stroke of the needle. So let's go over that again real quick. I'm rotating only the hand wheel on the machine above the table, and the handle under the table is at 6 o'clock, and the nose of the machine is at 6 o'clock. So as I start to rotate the hand wheel, you see the needle goes down. It would be puncturing the fabric. Continuing on down, it grabs the thread, it comes back up, it tucks into the nipple, and then the nipple starts to rise, okay? Now let's talk about the dead spot at the top, okay? The nipple goes up, and then it starts to come back down, but there's a pause in the nipple being at the top when the needle's actually still moving. So right now the nipple is up all the way and the nipple stops moving, but you can see the needle's coming out. That's the dead spot where it looks like it's up, but you don't really know. You could be plus or minus like 30 minutes on the notch. So if you watch this, when the nipple's at the top, okay, sorry, start down, up. As the nipple starts to come up to the top, there's a dead spot where the nipple's not moving, but the needle is. And that's like 30 minutes right there. Do you see that now the notch is moving? Notch is moving like 30 minutes. If you're off by 30 minutes, your timing isn't going to be as good as it should be. So that's why you set the timing with the action of the needle and the notch. Now let's zoom in real quick here on my needle. Okay, I'm not going to move the phone, but hopefully you guys can see the triangular point of the needle and the hook. The hook is above it. If I turn it this way, you can see the hook. Okay, and now I'm turning my handles now at 3 o'clock. You can see the hook. All right, so I'm having it at 6 o'clock. My needle might be a little crooked, so I think my needle is crooked. Okay, hold on. Okay, just rotated and tightened up my needle. So that's the way the needle works. So you can see if I lower the needle down a little bit, the hook is there and the triangular point. So we'll go back to the highest position. So this is the height that I set my needle to. Right about here. And that's the dead spot. That's why I'm going back and forth, is because there's a dead spot. That's just the tip of your needle sticking out. That's where I adjust my needle and set it there. Okay, so I have adjusted my needle, and now that's the highest possible position for you to put your needle and have your machine still work. Just the tip sticking out. Tighten your needle in and put the hook at 6 o'clock, and then time your machine from here. And if you don't know if your needle's in the right position, lower it down a little, turn your handle to 9 o'clock, turn your handle to 3 o'clock, turn it back to 6, and that's the right position with your hook facing 6. And then pull your nipple up. You should have just the tip. That's a little more maybe than it should be, but it's okay. So you have just the tip sticking out. Now, how do you check your timing? Okay, so hang on a minute. I'm going to set the phone holder up so I can talk. Okay, so now we're going to check the position of the notch. So you can see on this machine, when my needle is in the highest position, the notch is actually more like 2 o'clock. Okay, that doesn't really matter. What matters is what's happening when the hook of the needle is ready to get the thread. If I rotate the handle under the table, the needle and the looper turn. So don't do that. Just leave the handle under the table at 6 o'clock and then just rotate the handle on top of the table. So you can see when my needle's in the highest position, this is a Cornelli A machine. It's a vintage machine. My looper notch is at now it's like 3 o'clock. So if I set my notch to 12:30, 1 o'clock, I will be off by potentially 2 hours, and my machine will never work right. And it's just particulars of the machine, all the gears, everything. They don't all exactly work the same. So setting your notch to 1 o'clock is just like throwing a ball with your eyes closed. You just don't know if you're going to hit the target. But what is important is as you watch your needle going down and you watch the notch come around, the notch is, it's hard to see because we're not looking down. I wanted you to see the side view. The notch is at 9 o'clock now, and now it's at 9:30, and look, there's my hook. The opening in the hook is pretty much horizontal with the top of the looper. Now, you can see here the top of the looper is actually lower than the machine, okay? The top of the looper is down here, and the machine is up here. So you want to have the hook of the needle horizontal and equal to the height of the top of the looper. So the notch would have brought the thread around and my needle would have caught it and brought it up. That's should be good timing. Anything else going on, it's not gonna catch right. So let's watch that again. The needle goes down. There's thread in the notch in the looper, and it brings the thread around across and in front of the needle. And then as the notch hits 9 o'clock, 9:30, the needle's on the way up, and the top of the looper with the notch with the thread in it is just crossing the needle now. It gets into the hook in the needle, and the needle will pull it up. That way I know I have the correct timing. We can rotate the handle to 9 o'clock, and you can watch this from the side, okay? So I just rotated the handle under the table. So you can see the needle's going down, the notch is coming across the front of the needle, and the thread would be going into the hook right now. The notch is half an hour past 9-ish, or well, now it's at noon, but the thread drops into the hook and it pulls it back up. So that's how this works. I'll reset the camera and let you see it from above. This machine may be a little fast because here's would be 9 o'clock, and then this would be like 9:30, Although when I look at it from the side, the top of the looper right here and the hook and the needle are pretty much right at the same height. So that should be actually pretty good. So this would be perfect timing. Now you can see if I lower my needle, when it's timed this way, it will be hitting the needle at a higher position up the shank. And that's not as good because then the thread's coming in kind of sideways. By the time the needle's in the position to collect it, the notch will be past it. And that's how you can catch only some or part of the threads of your thread. You can like rip your thread in half. And when you have bad timing, you'll see like broken thread strands on the top, and on the bottom you'll see sort of like a rat nest of pieces of your thread because the hook is not catching your thread, or the hook is piercing your thread and catching only half of your thread. Now I'm going to reset the camera to the vertical position for the plan view or bird's eye view. Okay, I got you as close to looking straight down I think as I can. So we're kind of going to watch this from the top now. So the needle's going down, the thread in the notch of the looper is going to come across the front of the needle. I have the hook at 6 o'clock, and the thread's going to pop into that opening of the needle right there. That's about 9:30, and then the needle's going to grab it and come up. And you can see if that's the highest point of the needle right there. My timing is actually, gosh, what is that, like 2:30? So it doesn't matter. You just need to get it when you first set your timing between 12 and 3-ish to then go back and check this. So just want your, so this is 9 o'clock, the notch is at 9. You want it just about right here when the hook of your needle is level with the top of the looper. And if you see the hook of the needle level with the top of your looper, but the notch is, say, here at 10 o'clock, that means your machine is too fast because you want the notch at 9:30, but it's at 10, so that's fast. If you are looking in and when this is rotating, the notch is like, say, here at, let's say, 8 o'clock, but your needle is higher up and the hook of the needle is level with the top of the looper, you would say that your machine is slow because the needle is at 8, but you want it to be at 9:30. So your machine would be slow by an hour and a half, okay? So when you're doing this, if your machine, let's say you rotate this and your needle is in the ideal position here, you can come in here with your Sharpie and you can, hang on, that one's kind of dull. You can come in here with your Sharpie and you can put a notch, a mark right here at 8:30, and then you can, you want it to get to here 9:30. Then you can, doesn't matter where your stuff is, you just know you have to move the notch from the 8:30 to the 9:30, and you do that by loosening the screw on the worm gear and rotating the worm gear that much. You don't have to do anything else. And if you can't reach the screw on the worm gear, it's kind of not important where the screw is. You just know that you want to move the notch. So when I rotate the handle under the table, the looper is moving. So if I rotate this until I can get access to the screw, say I can get access to the screw here, I'm going to put a Sharpie mark over here, and I want it to move an hour and a half. I'm going to put another Sharpie mark there. I'm going to reach my screw. I'm going to loosen it. I'm going to rotate the worm gear until I'm here. I'm going to retighten my screw, and then I'm just going to double check. It's that easy. You don't have to worry about accessing the screw because wherever the notch is, it's connected. The notch in the looper is connected to the worm gear. So the minute you loosen the screw in the worm gear and you rotate the worm gear, that notch will move. Okay, I hope that helps. I hope I explain things so you can understand how to time your machine. But right now, this is handle at 6 o'clock, needle in the highest position. The hook and the needle goes down. The looper brings the thread across. The thread goes into the hook and the needle right there. It's secure in the hook and the needle when the notch is at 9:30, and the needle catches it and pulls it up. That's all you got to do. Set your needle at the highest position and fine tune your timing, okay? You can't go by the 1 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, because look, this is 12, okay? Sorry, this is 12, this is 3. Somewhere in here, in between 12:30, 1 o'clock, that's where you sort of like dry set your worm gear by tightening the screw, and then you fine tune it by watching this action and verifying the height of your needle is ready to catch the thread when your notch is at 9:30. Basically, I would set your timing this way. I would set the height of your needle for the high position of the needle and nipple, and then I would rotate my needle down so that on the upstroke, the hook opening of the needle is level with the top flat part of the looper. I would set my notch to 9:30, and you're kind of done. So sorry for the very long video, but I wanted to give you guys just all the knowledge that I have on how to time a machine, and hopefully it won't be a mystery anymore. This is just one of the videos that I just hadn't gotten around to making, but I'm trying to get as much information out there onto YouTube as possible, so that you guys can learn. Okay, so thanks for watching my video on timing. Hopefully I have thoroughly and clearly explained how to time your machine to get the best stitches possible. Once you've done this timing, go back and test your machine and look at your stitches and make sure that there's nothing weird happening on the bottom of the fabric and that you get beautiful, crisp, clear chains on the top. If you're not getting perfect stitches, that's when you can go back in and check your timing. So you can rotate your needle to like 5:30 and see if your stitches get better, or you can rotate the needle to 6:30. So when you change the angle of your needle from like 6 o'clock to 5:30 or 6:30, you're sort of artificially actually changing the timing by a half an hour, and that's troubleshooting. Now, for ease of use, and if other people are going to come and use your machine, you really want to have your timing set right so your machine functions properly with the hook and the needle set to 6. But to troubleshoot, if you want to know if your timing's off, you can kind of change the hook and your needle to 5:30 or to 6:30, and you may get really a lot better results in one of those settings. Then you know your timing's off by half an hour. And then you just have to go in and figure out if it's fast or slow and rotate the worm gear a little bit and reset the timing, okay? That's how you can kind of troubleshoot a little. I have other videos posted which go into great detail on troubleshooting, and there's another one that has more video of the action of the notch and the needle. But hopefully this is helpful to you, okay? Thanks again for watching. I hope you guys can get your machines up and running. Thank you.